3 days before my retirement celebration, the woman who had arranged flowers for my family for 30 years pulled me behind her shop and said, "I need you to hear something. Don't make a sound." I didn't understand. I thought maybe she'd found damage on the centerpieces, or there was a problem with the peonies I'd ordered. Edna McCarthy had done flowers for my mother's funeral, my wedding in 1987, my husband Frank's memorial in 2018. She was 72 and had hands that smelled permanently of stems and cold water. She was not a dramatic woman. She locked her back door from the inside. I followed her into the small storage room behind the main shop, where buckets of lilies sat on shelves in the dark. She turned off the overhead light. I almost asked why, but something in her face made me stop. Voices came through the wall. Her shop shared a thin wall with the back office of Hargrove Financial, the advisory firm my son-in-law ran 2 doors down from her on Clement Street. I had used Hargrove for 7 years. I had trusted it with nearly everything I had left after Frank died. The voice was my son-in-law's. Martin, 41 years old, Yale Law, handsome in the way that makes people trust you before you've said a word. "The power of attorney is ready," he said. "We just need the signature Saturday night." Another voice. Younger, my daughter, Sandra. "And she won't read it before she signs?" "She trusts you," Martin said. "That's the whole point. Hand her the pen. Tell her it's the deed transfer she already agreed to. She's signing 6 documents Saturday. She won't notice the 7th. I pressed my back against the cold shelving. "The Clement Street property," Sandra said. "And the trust account? Once the power of attorney activates, both transfer within 72 hours. The firm account too." Silence for a moment. Then Sandra again. "What about the condo?" "That comes after, once she's relocated." Edna found my hand in the dark. She held it the way you hold someone who is about to fall. "I want to tell you I did something then. I want to say I walked out, or I confronted them, or I made some sound that let them know. I didn't. I stood in that flower storage room with lavender and cold water and the smell of refrigerated stems, and I listened to my daughter and my son-in-law decide what to do with the rest of my life. Relocated meant Sunridge. I knew because Martin had mentioned it twice over the last 3 months. A memory care facility 40 minutes outside the city? Very clean, he'd said, very peaceful. I am 68 years old. My memory is fine. The voices moved. Chairs scraped. A door opened and closed. Edna turned the light back on. Her eyes were red at the edges, not from crying, from the effort of holding still. "They've been in there before," she said quietly. 2 weeks ago. Same conversation. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't not tell you. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. "How much of the centerpieces are done?" I asked. She blinked. 5 of the 8. "Finish them," I said. "I'll pick them up Friday." I walked out through the front of the shop onto Clement Street. The fog was coming in off the bay the way it does by 3 in the afternoon in San Francisco. The street looked exactly as it always had. The dry cleaner, the Korean bakery, the wine bar on the corner where Frank and I used to go on Friday nights. I got into my car. I sat for a long time. The retirement celebration was Saturday. 34 years with the San Francisco Unified School District, 22 of them as principal of Westlake Elementary. 300 students on a good year. Parents who brought me tamales at Christmas. Teachers I'd hired who were now principals themselves. The district superintendent was flying in from Sacramento, and buried in the stack of papers my son-in-law was planning to hand me Saturday night, between the deed transfer I had agreed to and the updated insurance forms, was a document that would hand him control of everything I had. The trust account Frank and I built across 40 years of teaching salaries and careful savings. The Clement Street property, a 2-unit building Frank bought in 1994 that I'd rented for 17 years and never once struggled to fill. The condo I lived in, and whatever the firm account meant. Martin managed our retirement investments. I had not looked closely enough in a long time. I did not cry. I drove home. My name is June Calloway, and I had 48 hours to understand exactly what was being taken from me. Frank died in February 2018. Heart attack, 63 years old, 2 years into retirement. We had planned to travel. Portugal first, then Japan. He had a whole notebook of restaurant names. For about 6 months after the funeral, I was not myself. I know that now. I made decisions I don't entirely remember making. I sold the second car. I canceled the Portugal trip. I let Martin take over the investment accounts because he was family and I didn't have the energy to learn new software and sit through quarterly calls. Sandra was 37 then. She and Martin had been married 4 years. No children. She was a project manager for a tech company, good at her job, efficient in the way that people are when they grew up being told they were the capable one. Frank and I had raised her to be independent. I think sometimes we raised her to be so independent that she learned early how to want things without asking. Martin came into our lives slowly, the way water comes into a boat, a little at a time, charming at dinners, helpful at taxes, good at making you feel like he was the only one in the room who understood the problem you were describing. After Frank died, he became more present. Weekly calls, suggestions. I started hearing the phrase, "at your stage of life," more often than I had ever expected. In October 2022, I forgot an appointment with my dentist. Sandra mentioned it to Martin. Martin mentioned it to Dr. Ferris, the neurologist who had been our family physician for 4 years. By November, Dr. Ferris, the neurologist who had been our family physician for 4 years. By November, Ferris had begun what he called routine cognitive monitoring. I thought it was standard. I was 66. I went to the appointments. I answered the questions. The assessments came back fine. Dr. Ferris always nodded and said the same thing. A few areas worth watching. By March 2023, Martin began suggesting Sunridge. Just a tour, he said. It's good to know your options. I told him I had options. I lived in my own condo. I managed my own calendar. I had walked 4 miles that morning. He smiled and changed the subject, and I thought that was the end of it. I sat in my car outside my building, and I thought about all of this for a long time. Then I took out my phone and called my accountant. Beverly Okofer had done my personal taxes since 2005. She was 60, Nigerian American, direct in a way that people sometimes mistook for rudeness until they understood it was just honesty. I told her I needed to see the investment account statements. All of them. Tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Martin usually sends those to me directly. He won't be sending them this time, I said. I need you to pull whatever you have and tell me what you see. Another pause. June. Is everything okay? I need you to tell me what's in those accounts, Beverly. I'll call you back in an hour. She called back in 40 minutes. The retirement accounts were intact, but there was a secondary investment account, something Martin had opened in 2021, an account I had signed paperwork for and then never thought about again because Martin managed it and Martin was family. That account had moved $340,000 in the past 18 months into a holding entity called Clearwater Advisory Partners, LLC. I've been looking at this for 20 minutes, Beverly said. That entity was formed in Delaware. March 2021. I can't find a business address or registered agent that makes sense. June, whose name is on this, pull it up, I said. She was quiet. Then Martin Hargrove, and Sandra Hargrove, and Sandra Hargrove. I closed my eyes. Don't say anything to anyone tonight, I said. Not a word. I'll come to your office first thing tomorrow. I went upstairs, made tea. I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table where Frank and I had eaten 30 years of breakfasts. 3 months. That's how long I'd been watching myself be slowly repositioned. The dental appointment they mentioned to the doctor. The investment account I didn't watch. The documents I hadn't read carefully. The retirement celebration with 6 documents and a 7th hidden inside. They had been building a case. Memory lapses they'd documented or invented. Financial complexity they'd handed to Martin to manage. A doctor who was supposed to certify that I was no longer capable. I would walk into my own retirement party, surrounded by people who loved me, and hand them everything. I picked up the phone again. A former teacher at Westlake, a woman named Alma, had left the district 4 years ago to work with an attorney specializing in elder financial fraud. I had written her a recommendation letter. I had not spoken to her in 2 years. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Alma, I need a name." The attorney's name was Russell Park. His office was in the Embarcadero, glass-fronted, sparse. He was 54, Korean American, the kind of quiet that means he was listening to everything, including what you weren't saying. I sat across from him at 9 the next morning, Beverly beside me with a folder of account statements, and I told him everything. The storage room, the voices, Clearwater Advisory, Dr. Ferris's monitoring, the 7th document. He read the statements Beverly brought without expression. Then he looked up. "Do you have the retirement celebration venue under your name?" "Yes, I booked it myself, the Meridian Club on Van Ness. And Saturday night, who controls what gets handed to you?" "Martin." He offered to organize the paperwork. Russell sat back. "The power of attorney they're planning, if it passes through Dr. Ferris's assessment, use the ability to contest the account transfers within 72 hours. The LLC structure means the money moves to Clearwater, and from there it can go offshore before you'd have standing in a California court to stop it. Can we stop it before Saturday?" He laced his fingers together. "We can freeze the accounts tonight, but stopping it before Saturday means you lose the element of surprise. If they know the accounts are frozen, they'll adjust. We may lose the ability to document what they intended." I looked at him. "You're saying let Saturday happen. I'm saying let Saturday happen in a way that you control." He pulled a legal pad toward him. "I have a colleague, Marcus Chen, former DA's office, now private. He does exactly this kind of documentation work. If you're willing, we can have everything in place by Saturday evening." "What does everything in place mean?" He wrote something down. "It means when they hand you that 7th document, the room already knows what it is." I drove home through morning fog and sat in the kitchen again. Frank's coffee mug was still on the shelf where I'd left it 6 years ago. Cream-colored, chipped on the handle, the name of a San Diego hotel he'd liked. I talk to him sometimes. I know how that sounds. I did it anyway. "They think I'm already gone," I said. "They've been writing the ending for months." The fog shifted outside the window. Nothing answered. But the thinking got clearer. Russell's colleague Marcus arrived at my condo at 2 that afternoon. He was 58, compact, gray at the temples, and he set a recorder and a legal pad on my kitchen table with the efficiency of someone who had done this in worse kitchens than mine. "Tell me about the financial history from the beginning," he said. "Not what you think matters, all of it." I told him about Frank's death, the investment handover, the account Martin had opened, Clearwater Advisory. I told him about the dental appointment and the cognitive monitoring and Dr. Ferris's areas worth watching. Marcus wrote in clean lines and only interrupted to clarify dates. At 4:30, he set down his pen. The LLC was formed 8 months after Frank died. That's when Martin began the transfer structure. He turned a page. Dr. Ferris billed Clearwater Advisory Partners for 3 consultation sessions in 2023. I sat very still. What does that mean? It means the neurologist running your cognitive assessments has a financial relationship with the entity your son-in-law controls. The kitchen was very quiet. "Has he done this before?" I asked. Marcus opened a second folder. 2 prior cases I found in the past 4 years. A retired judge in Marin County, 2021. His stepson. Assisted living within 6 months, assets transferred. He passed away the following year. He turned a page. A retired professor at USF, 2022. Her nephew. Same structure, different LLC. She's still alive, living with her sister in Tucson. She's willing to speak. I looked at the folder. Her name? Constance Aldrich. She said, and I'm quoting, "Tell whoever needs to hear this that I wish someone had been in a flower shop." My throat tightened. I thought about Edna McCarthy, standing in the dark with her hand shaking, holding mine. Russell joined us by phone at 6. Beverly was there too. We sat around my kitchen table with account statements and legal documents spread across the wood Frank and I had bought at a salvage yard in 1991, and we made a plan. The Meridian Club held 200 people. 200 people who had known me for decades. Teachers, parents, district administrators, neighbors, old friends. The superintendent flying in from Sacramento. People who believed in this celebration the way you believe in things that feel earned. The plan was this: let the evening run as scheduled. Let Martin organize his paperwork. Let him hand me the 7 documents as the room settled after dinner and before the formal remarks. At the moment he asked me to sign, Russell would be standing at the back of the room. Beverly would be at table 4 with the account statements. Marcus would be at the AV panel with the documentation, and Constance Aldridge and Tucson would be on a live video link. I would not sign. I would speak. The morning of the celebration, Sandra called to confirm the time. "We'll be there by 6, she said. "Martin has everything organized." "Wonderful," I said. "I can't wait." She paused just a moment. "Are you doing okay, Mom? You sound tired." "I'm fine," I said. "I'm just ready for Saturday to come." I had not slept much. I'd spent 2 hours the night before sitting under the lamp in the living room with Frank's notebook of restaurant names, the one he'd made for Portugal. Tiny handwriting, careful descriptions. A fish restaurant in Lisbon with blue tile walls. A bakery in Porto that opened at 5 in the morning. We never went. I thought about the things you don't do because you think you have more time, and the things people take from you while you're still trying to figure out how to move forward without the person you built everything with. I put the notebook back on the shelf. I got dressed. I put on the green dress I'd bought in September and hadn't worn yet. At 6:45, I walked into the Meridian Club. The room looked beautiful, and the centerpieces were on every table. Peonies and white ranunculus and small branches of eucalyptus, the combination I'd chosen because Frank had always liked peonies and I had never told anyone that, and it was the only private thing I'd asked for in any of the arrangements. I stood at the door for a moment. 340 people, give or take, almost everyone I had spent my working life with. Children I'd watched grow up and come back to enroll their own children. Sandra found me near the entrance. She looked beautiful. She hugged me and held on a beat longer than usual, and I felt the complicated thing that lives in me about her. The love that doesn't go away no matter what. The grief of what I'd heard through Edna's wall. Martin shook my hand. His eyes were warm and easy, the way they always were. "Big night," he said. "It is," I agreed. Dinner ran long in the good way. The superintendent gave remarks about systemic change and 20 years of literacy scores. Former teachers stood and told stories I half remembered and was glad to hear again. A father whose daughter I'd advocated for in 2009, a girl with a processing disorder who everyone said needed a different placement, stood up with his daughter who was now a pediatric nurse in Oakland, and I did not manage to keep it together for that part. At 8:20, Martin came to my seat. "June, I have the paperwork when you're ready. Maybe after the formal remarks? No rush?" "Of course," I said. "Let's do it." He smiled and went back to his table. At 8:30, the MC introduced me for the closing remarks. I walked to the podium with the typed speech I had spent 3 weeks writing. 4 pages about gratitude and public education and what 34 years in the same district teaches you about the long arc of small decisions. I said it on the podium. I looked out at the room. "I want to start," I said, "by talking about Frank." The room went still the way rooms do when someone mentions the dead in a place full of people who loved them. Frank Calloway died 6 years ago. He was the best person I knew. He was a high school history teacher for 31 years, and he never once complained that his wife's school got the bigger budget. Some laughter. He used to say that a good institution is only as strong as the people who refuse to let it become something else. I paused. I've been thinking about that a lot this week. The room was quiet. Sandra was at table 3. Martin beside her. 3 days ago, I was in a flower shop on Clement Street. My friend Edna was finishing the centerpieces you're looking at tonight, and I heard something through a wall that I have spent 3 days trying to find a different explanation for. Martin's face changed. Just slightly. The warmth receded. I heard my son-in-law and my daughter discuss a plan to transfer controls of my finances, my property, and my medical decision-making to themselves, using a document they planned to slip into a stack of papers and ask me to sign tonight. The room erupted. Not loudly, in the way rooms erupt when people don't know which direction to turn. I raised my hand. The room quieted faster than I expected. 34 years of managing a school will do that. I want to be fair, I said. So I'm going to show you what I found, and I'm going to let you judge. I nodded to Marcus at the back. The screen behind me lit up. The first document was the power of attorney. Section 4. The clause Russell had marked and read. I read it aloud, slowly. In the event of certified cognitive impairment, all financial assets, property holdings, and medical proxy authority transfer immediately to Martin Hargrove and Sandra Hargrove without requirement for further consent or judicial review. The room was completely silent. This document was to be included in the stack Martin would hand me tonight. It was not described to me. I was not told it existed. The second slide. The Clearwater Advisory Partners LLC filing. Delaware, March 2021. 8 months after Frank died, my son-in-law formed a private holding company. My daughter's name is listed as co-founder. $340,000 moved from an investment account under my name into this entity over the past 18 months. I looked at my daughter. She was white. Sandra, I know you signed those LLC documents. I don't know exactly what Martin told you they were for. I hope for your sake it was something that sounded reasonable. Martin stood. June, this is... Sit down, Martin. He sat. I don't know if I've ever been more certain of anything. There is a third piece, I said, and this one is the one that kept me awake. The third slide. Dr. Ferris's billing records. For the past 18 months, my neurologist has been conducting what he called routine cognitive monitoring. He told me my results showed areas worth watching. He used those results to build what would have become the legal basis for transferring my decision-making authority. I paused. He billed Clearwater Advisory Partners for 3 consultation sessions. Someone in the room said something I couldn't hear. Several people stood. Dr. Ferris was paid by the company that stood to receive my assets to certify that I was no longer capable of managing them. Martin was on his feet again. 2 men I had hired as security, dressed as guests, moved toward him from opposite sides of the room. Before you hear from me directly, I said, I'd like you to hear from someone else. I nodded to Marcus again. The screen changed. A living room in Tucson. A woman, early 70s, silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She sat very straight. My name is Constance Aldrich, she said. I was a professor of literature at USF for 26 years. In 2022, my nephew used a structure nearly identical to what you've just seen to remove me from my own home, liquidate my savings, and place me in a facility where I was told I had moderate dementia. She looked directly into the camera. I do not have dementia. I have a nephew who knew how to find a doctor who would say what he paid him to say. She paused. I got out because my sister drove 12 hours and refused to leave. Not everyone has a sister who does that. I'm here tonight so that June Calloway doesn't have to rely on luck. The screen went dark. The room was silent for a long time. I am 68 years old, I said. I have taught school in this city for 34 years. I have raised a daughter. I have buried a husband. I have managed a budget, a staff, and the expectations of 3,000 families over the course of my career. I looked at the table where Martin was now seated, between 2 security staff, his jaw tight. I am not confused. I am not declining, and I am not signing anything tonight. Russell Goldman stood from table 7. Your Honor, he said, addressing the retired judge who was seated at table 12 as a guest, a detail we had arranged carefully. The emergency injunction is in effect as of 9 p.m. All accounts are frozen. The transfer is blocked. The retired judge, Honorable Patricia Wells, 71, former Superior Court, San Francisco, nodded once. She had agreed to be present as a witness. She had seen Constance's file the day before. So noted, she said. 2 uniformed officers who had been outside the main entrance came through the door. Martin was escorted out first. He said nothing. His face had gone somewhere I didn't recognize. Dr. Ferris was not at the celebration. He was contacted that evening. He retained a lawyer within the hour, which Russell told me later was a sign of someone who knows exactly what they've done. Sandra did not move for a long time after Martin left. She sat at table 3 with her hands in her lap and her head down. Rosa, our housekeeper of 20 years, who I'd asked to sit near her tonight, because I didn't know what Sandra knew or what she'd do, moved to the chair beside her and said something quietly. Sandra didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. I stepped down from the podium. The room began to shift. Some people came toward me. Others moved in small groups and spoke in low voices. The superintendent touched my arm and said, very quietly, "I'm glad you had 48 hours." I went to Sandra. She looked up when I got close. Her eyes were wrecked. "I didn't know about the doctor," she said. "I swear to you. I signed the LLC because Martin said it was a tax structure. He said it was to protect the estate. And the power of attorney?" She looked at the table. "He said you'd been forgetting things. He said you'd agreed to it in principle. He said it was what you wanted. Did you ask me?" She didn't answer. "Sandra," I sat down across from her. "I need you to tell me what you knew." She took a long breath. "I knew there was a transfer. I thought it was 30%. Some kind of managed handover. He made it sound like we were helping you. And when it started to feel like something else," she looked up. "He said it was too late. He said I'd already signed everything. He said if I tried to stop it, I'd be liable too." Her voice broke on the last word. I was scared. I looked at my daughter, 39 years old, efficient and capable, and somehow, in the space of 3 years, completely managed by the man she'd married. "I believe you didn't know all of it," I said. "I don't know yet what that means for us, but I believe that part." She put her face in her hands. I sat with her until the room was mostly empty. The legal process took 7 months. Martin was charged in October with elder financial fraud, fraudulent transfer of assets, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. He had, in addition to my accounts, 2 prior clients at Hargrove Financial who had signed documents they didn't fully understand. Both were over 70. One of them had already lost $180,000. Martin's license was suspended the week of his arraignment. Dr. Ferris surrendered his medical license voluntarily in November, which Russell told me meant he had negotiated something. A civil settlement structured to avoid criminal prosecution, paid into a victim restitution fund. Constance Aldridge received a portion. So did the other 2 Hargrove clients. I received a full independent cognitive assessment from a neurologist at UCSF in September. Dr. Angela Torres, 47, ran 2 days of testing and wrote a report that concluded no evidence of cognitive impairment, memory, and executive function within the top percentile for age, decision-making capacity fully intact. She shook my hand when it was over and said, "For what it's worth, you scored better than most of my 45-year-old patients." I thought that was something Frank would have enjoyed hearing. The Clearwater accounts were frozen and eventually ordered returned. I recovered $290,000 of the $340,000 that had moved. The rest had already paid legal fees and entity costs. Russell told me that was better than most outcomes. I restructured everything. Beverly took over full financial management with due authorization on any transaction over $5,000. Russell drafted a new estate plan with an independent trustee, a woman named Janet Osei, who came with 3 references I called personally. I changed the name on the Clement Street property to a family trust that Martin could not touch. Sandra was not charged. The prosecutors determined her role was limited to signing documents she had been deceived about. She resigned from any connection to Hargrove Financial, which no longer existed in any case. In November, she moved to a smaller apartment in the Richmond district. She started seeing a therapist. She sent me a card at Thanksgiving that said, on the inside, only, I'm sorry. I'm working on it. I love you. I put it on the shelf next to Frank's coffee mug. I did not call her back right away. I needed the winter. In January, I started a blog. I know that sounds like something someone's grandchild sets up for them, but I set it up myself, and I wrote about what had happened in plain language, because Russell said there were 7 cases like mine in the Bay Area in the past 3 years, and most of them ended differently. People wrote back from places I'd never thought about. A woman in Boise, a man in his late 60s in Charlotte, who'd recognized some of the same patterns in his nephew's behavior and didn't know what to call it. A retired teacher in Portland, Oregon, who printed my second post and brought it to her bank manager. I wrote about Frank's notebook, the restaurant in Lisbon with blue tile walls, the bakery in Porto. In March, I booked a flight. The bakery opened at 5 in the morning. I was there at 5:15, a little jet-lagged, standing on the cobblestone street with a pastry I didn't know the name of, watching the city come alive in the gray early light. And I thought, I almost didn't get here. Not because I was old, because I trusted the wrong people and stopped paying close enough attention. I thought about Edna McCarthy in the dark, holding my hand. I thought about Constance Aldridge, sitting very straight in her sister's living room in Tucson. I thought about Frank, who had 31 years of telling students that a good institution only survives if someone refuses to let it become something else. In April, Sandra called. It was the first time since November. We talked for 45 minutes. Not about Martin, not about the account statements, not about the power of attorney or the 7th document or any of it. We talked about Frank. She'd found some of his old letters, things he'd written her when she was in college. She read me one. She cried. I cried. I don't know how to fix this, she said. I don't either, I said. But I'd like to try. I am not going to tell you it got easy quickly. It didn't. We met for coffee in May at a place on Irving Street, neutral ground halfway between us. She looked smaller than I remembered. She apologized again, more slowly this time, with more specifics. I listened. I told her what those 3 months had felt like from my side. The slow repositioning, the way it had looked like concern but felt like erasure. She said, I think I wanted to be in charge of something. Martin made me feel like I was helping. I needed to believe that. I know, I said. Did you know before the flower shop? She asked. I thought about it honestly. I knew something felt wrong. I didn't let myself look at it directly. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I'm sorry I was part of making you doubt yourself. I looked at my daughter across a small table on a gray May morning in San Francisco, and I thought about all the ways people lose each other while they're both still alive. The meetings instead of dinners, the quarterly calls instead of conversations, the assumption that efficiency is the same as love. We made each other smaller, I said. Both of us. I don't know what we are now exactly. Not what we were. Not strangers. Something that's being rebuilt from materials we didn't know we still had. Last month, she came to dinner at the condo. Rosa made the lamb dish Frank used to request for birthdays. After dinner, Sandra picked up the Portugal notebook from the shelf and paged through it slowly. Did you go? She asked. Porto, I said. In March. She looked up. Was it good? I said it was exactly what he wrote down. She set the notebook back carefully in exactly the right place, and for a moment neither of us said anything. If you have watched this far, I want to tell you one thing that isn't about Martin or the accounts or the legal process. It's about the 3 months before the flower shop, the dental appointment they reported to the doctor, the investment forms I signed without reading, the way I heard "you're not yourself" lately often enough that I started to believe it. I was tired. I was grieving. Still, 6 years later, in the way grief doesn't go away, but changes shape. I handed things to people because I thought that was what family was for. What I know now is that love is not the same as trust, and trust is not the same as oversight. The people who want to help you and the people who want to manage you can look identical for a long time. Pay attention to your accounts. Read the documents before you sign them. Know who your doctors are talking to. And if someone you have known for 30 years pulls you behind their shop and tells you to be quiet and listen, listen. Edna's centerpieces are still the most beautiful I have ever seen at any event I have ever attended. She is coming to dinner next week. I have a bottle of wine she's never tried. Frank would have liked her. Looking back now, I keep returning to one question. Not how did Martin do it or why did Sandra let it happen? Those answers came out in depositions and therapy sessions and long quiet conversations over coffee on Irving Street. The question I keep returning to is simpler and harder than any of those. How did I let myself get that far from my own life without noticing? Because that's the truth I had to sit with after everything was over. Martin didn't build that plan in a week. He built it across 3 years of small decisions I made. Handing over the investment accounts because I was tired, signing forms I didn't read because I trusted the name on them, hearing you seem forgetful lately enough times that I started watching myself for signs of something that wasn't there. Every one of those moments was a door I opened. He just walked through them. I'm not saying that to take blame for what he chose to do. What Martin did was a crime, and what Dr. Florist did was a betrayal of everything a physician is supposed to be, and they will both carry that. What I'm saying is that I had a role too, and pretending otherwise would be a different kind of dishonesty. I think about Constance Aldridge, sitting straight-backed in her sister's living room in Tucson, and what she said, that she wished someone had been in a flower shop. She got out because her sister drove 12 hours and refused to leave. I got out because Edna McCarthy had known me for 30 years and couldn't stay quiet. Neither of us got out because we were paying close enough attention to our own lives. That's the part that stays with me. Intelligence doesn't protect you if you stop using it on yourself. I had run a school for 22 years. I understood budgets, personnel, conflict, the slow erosion of institutions when no one is watching. And I stopped watching my own. Grief will do that. Exhaustion will do that. The people who love you, or who you believe love you, will offer to carry things. And sometimes you hand over more than you meant to, because you just need to put something down for a while. What I know now is that putting something down is not the same as giving it away. You can rest without surrendering. You can trust people without disappearing from your own accounts, your own documents, your own medical records. Those aren't burdens to hand off. They're the shape of your own life. You have to stay in them. And then there's Sandra, my daughter, who knew something was wrong and was too afraid to say so, who wanted to be capable and instead became complicit, who loved me and hurt me in the same motion without fully understanding either. I have spent a long time thinking about what it costs a person to choose fear over honesty with someone they love. It costs more than they expect. She is learning that. I am watching her learn it. Edna is coming to dinner next week. I have a bottle of wine she hasn't tried and a story about a bakery in Porto that I want to tell someone who would appreciate it. Constance and I send each other emails on a regular Thursdays. Last month she told me she started teaching a literature seminar at her local library. Free. Open to anyone over 60. She said she needed to feel useful again. I understood that completely. You cannot get back the months that were taken. You cannot undo the fear or the disorientation of hearing your own daughter's voice making plans for a version of your life you never agreed to. But you can decide what comes after. You can pay attention. You can read the documents. You can choose every single day to stay present in your own story instead of letting someone else write the ending while you aren't looking. That's what I'm doing now. One day at a time, with the notebook Frank left on the shelf, and a list of places we never got to go.